So today we're hearing in the gospel reading and in our first readings something about the nature of the human race. We begin with and we hear in the first reading the creation story. And if you're aware of it, there are two incompatible creation stories within the first two chapters of Genesis. They're not the same story. They're different visions. They have different themes and spiritual teachings that they want to convey. But they were put together to help us understand a broader vision of what we might call Christian anthropology. For us Christians, it's like a view of Christian, who is man and women? What is the human race? In the first reading in Genesis, the first chapter, the story really is a picture of humanity who is the crowning feature of God's creation. It's it's at the end of creation that God has created the human race, the very end. But in the second chapter, which we heard today, the theme is more that God doesn't want us to be alone, that we're not meant to be isolated, that we are deliberately created for another, for others in our lives. In fact, we're diminished when we are alone and have no other connections around us. That to be fully human is to have people in our lives and connections to one another. So when Adam was created, he was alone, and there was no one to communicate with, no one to share his heart with, no one to experience dialogue and conversation and connections. Now, the animals were wonderful, but they were not able to share their heart in the same way that another human being shared his heart. So God realized he needs others in his life, and therefore he created Eve. And as they learned to love one another, they become the image of God, like the Trinity. I mean, this is a very Christian interpretation of that text. Hebrew people, Jewish people in the synagogue down the road may not have the exact take on it. But we see God as Trinity, and in this picture of people loving one another, we see an image of the Trinity itself, God who is love and communion. This scripture is what, in the background, this notion that we're made for one another is in the background when the Pharisees try to trick Jesus into a debate. And they focused on the literal and what is lawful. But Jesus takes this question and amplifies it, makes it larger, in the hopes of opening their minds. And he says God created human beings for one another in such a case that no human being should ever be dismissed. No human being should be discarded like a piece of furniture, an old piece of furniture, or a well-worn coat. That's the question. That we're all of us meant to be a part of this creation. I've been thinking about this idea of the importance of encounter, of meaning. This has been forefront of my mind, especially this past week, with all of the memorials and days of remembrance for truth and reconciliation. And I think that the church sinned by what it did in those residential schools, but also the church can have a response to heal. And especially if we focus on the writings of Pope Francis in these past couple of years, who has a vision not just of the church and the reform that is needed in our own church. But his vision is global. He's looking at the whole planet. How is it that in this world of polarizations and divisions and wars and violence, how is it that we can come together? And he says it's through an encounter. In Spanish, the word is encuentro. Now, I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I know that encuentro has a larger meaning than the English word encounter. It's really more feeling, more warm, more encuentro, gathering together. And Pope Francis says we really are living in a world of disencuentro, a world of fragmentation, a world of polarizations, a world of populisms. I was sent a little video. My sister from Hamilton sent me a video a few weeks ago now. Maybe some of you have seen it. But it was Justin Trudeau on his campaign, and this is not a political statement. I'm not for Trudeau or against Trudeau. It's not about politics. It's about a human being, a national figure. And he's walking down the street, and people are screaming at him. Vulgarities, hate language, screaming and screaming. And it's like, is this what we've become? That people are no longer ashamed to be vulgar, or to be hateful. What's happening? What is happening to us? I don't care if it was Justin Trudeau or anybody, the Queen of England, we were never taught, any of us, and we all know this, to be this kind of disrespectful to one another. How do we heal what we're seeing in our society? Pope Francis has a huge suggestion. It's in all of his writings. It began in his apostolic exhortation called Evangelii Gaudium, his first kind of pronouncement, which is about our relationship in the church. And then he followed up with Laudato Si, his encyclical, which is about our creation to this world, to this planet. And then most recently Fratelli Tutti, where he talks about social friendships, about friendships between groups of people, about how we can manage a life of encountering the other, of being reconciled with one another. And he says the only way is through the culture of encounter, that we exist in such a way as I enter into a relationship with another where I can hear you. So I have to listen. You see, when Adam was created, there was no one to listen to. That's why God created a partner for him. How can you listen when there's no one speaking? And then he says you have to hear what's being said and then enter into that person's world and try to understand who that person is. And it's mutual. They listen to me and they listen to my story. And then we begin to have a discussion. Things change when we have an encounter with another human being on that level. And the Pope's vision is to create a whole culture of these kinds of encounters worldwide, globally. And he's putting his words into action. And as you know, he recently visited Iraq and spoke with the Ayatollah there, had a conversation with him about Islam. How can we get along? He met in Saudi Arabia, like he's going even beyond the Christian church, the Catholic church, to speak to others, getting them on board, to create a world where we do not have people who are a throwaway culture. He uses the term a throwaway culture. There aren't people, no one is disposable. No one can be thrown out like the garbage. Every human being matters in this world. That's his kind of position. So I've been trying to study it more. I want to learn more and more. I wish I had lots of time just to focus and study more what the Pope is saying. But we're all busy. We all have busy lives. We're working, we're distracted, we need time to rest. And so we have to I have to carve out time to be able to follow this through, because I think it's an answer to the problems that we experience in Canada with the Native people, with the Indigenous peoples, that we begin to hear them and to listen to them and to enter into an encounter with the other so that healing can happen, so that we can build each other up, not tear each other down. That's what we need. We need to speak words to help build each other up, to give confidence to one another, not to spout out ugly vulgarities at one another. So I'm not sure where that comes from, this idea that I have the right to be vulgar in public to other people, that I can scream at you till the veins in my neck are popping out and it's all right. It's not a way to treat human beings. It's not the way we were meant to treat one another. That's in the Bible. It comes out of Genesis. It comes from the words of Jesus. So all of us want to learn how to appreciate the other. That's why we're here tonight. We are hoping that when we gather together in the Eucharist, something amazing happens. It's not just that we're praying for ourselves, we do that. It's not just praying for our parish and for the church and for the Pope, those are all important. But something even deeper happens. Some kind of presence takes place. The presence of God in our midst. And may we recognize this transformation that happens to us when we experience the Eucharist. That when we receive Christ into our lives, we're being transformed and healed in such a way that we will be more concerned about one another. And Jesus invites us to live into relationships and into that truth, not just for a small time, but for all of our lives.